who's Executive Director of People for Community Recovery. Cheryl is an outgoing member of NEJAC. And then we have Dr. April Baptiste, who's a member of NEJAC. She's a professor of environmental studies and Africana and Latin American studies at Colgate University. So my first question to everyone is just a little bit of background. Tell us who you are and how you got engaged in doing environmental justice work. And I'll start with Nataki first.
You would start with me. Thank you so much, Sacoby, for the invitation to be here. So Nataki Osborne Jelks, one of the vice chairs of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. On the council, I represent a community-based organization called the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, otherwise known as WAWA, and the Proctor Creek Stewardship Council. And these are two groups that I helped to start in Atlanta. But really the story to how I got engaged in environmental justice goes a little bit back further to my childhood. I'm originally from Mississippi, but we moved around just a little bit, and we lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for several years. And when I lived in Baton Rouge, in what folks call the Cancer Alley corridor, we lived, less than a mile away from a pollution generating facility. And I began to, just kind of connect some dots between the pollution index that was always high, the air always smelled bad, the water smelled and tasted bad. Anecdotally, before I moved to Louisiana, I didn't have any, kind of problems with my skin, but after living there, I had a lot of light colored splotches on my skin that the doctors called hypopigmentation. They gave me a battery of allergy tests, everything from foods to, laundry detergents, and they never could figure out what was wrong. And they just kind of gave me a topical cream and said, you just have hypopigmentation. I was, as a child and, in my adolescent, as a teenager, I didn't want to wear shorts and things like that because I had all of these really light colored splotches on my skin. But when I moved away from Louisiana, it all dried up. It went away. But the key thing was that after living there, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it wasn't that we could, tie her diagnosis to anything that we may have been exposed to. But by this time, I had some wherewithal, and I knew that possibility existed. And that really gave me the impetus to want to get involved. And so, as I went to college, I studied, science and engineering. And I thought, I want to be able to use these scientific tools that I'm gaining to try to help, communities like, the one that I grew up in Baton Rouge, and still have family, in Baton Rouge, still have family in other places that are impacted by a number of pollution sources. And as I even made my way to Atlanta, I found that, the side of town that I live on, the west side of Atlanta, is overburdened with environmental toxicants and stressors and lots of challenges. So it's been very personal for me in terms of my engagement. But, as I look around and connect all of these dots, I had no choice really but to go in this area to try to, work with communities, my own community and others, to try to address environmental health threats and environmental racism.
Thank you for that. Let's go to Mike next, and then as Matt, as you probably looking at the questions, make sure we the questions that you can legally respond to. So this, okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wilson. And it is really an honor and a privilege to be invited to participate in the symposium. For me, my exposure to issues of contamination that were particularly affecting underserved and overburdened communities actually came through work that was done under contract for EPA, a lot of work under the Superfund program. And in particular, it was a wide range of sites in a lot of locations, but I say the sites that had the biggest impact on me were residential lead remediation sites in various places in the country. And I was just thinking about two in particular that were very different. One being the Tar Creek site in Northeast Oklahoma, very rural, predominantly low-income communities, and then the USS Lead site in East Chicago, Indiana, where public housing had to be evacuated because the lead concentrations were so high. And then the other thing that I've been very involved in that has been very meaningful to me, where I've seen a lot of progress, is I live outside Washington, D.C. We've got the Potomac to the northwest and the Anacostia River to the east. I've been working on cleanup of the Anacostia River for over 15 years now, and there's been a great deal of progress where what I would have called essentially a ruined resource, it was called the Forgotten River. There's still a great deal of cleanup work that needs to happen there, but that work there's been a lot of progress in terms of improving water quality and a great deal of engagement from the communities in the watershed, many of which are minority and low-income communities.
So thank you for that, Mike. Let's go to April. Talk about how you got into this work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sacoby, for inviting me and for having me here. I'm really excited to be a part of the symposium this year. Again, my name is April Baptiste, and I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, so I have deep Caribbean heritage and roots. And similar to Nataki, my interest in the environment, sort of environmental problems, started as a child. I grew up in a rural part of Trinidad and Tobago, and we were surrounded by oil and gas wells. And of course, at that time, walking to and from school, not really realizing that that there were hazards around me, but knowing that this must not be good because I'm smelling, the fumes of oil and gas in the air. So that sort of piqued my interest in these notions of, the physical environment, hazards, those types of things. And then I actually came to it through my dissertation work, looking at oil and gas drilling in Trinidad and Tobago and the way in which it impacts marginalized communities. And so that's how I sort of got involved. I've since, done a lot of work on climate justice. Being from a small island developing state, climate justice is really important to me as well. And so that has really brought me to doing this environmental justice work. I teach a class on environmental justice in the United States, and then another one that focuses on global environmental justice problems. So have been involved in NEJAC for 2 years, I believe. Now I serve as a member of the academic stakeholder group. And right now I'm actually one of the co-chairs of the Justice 40 work group along with Sacoby. So it's really been a learning experience for me over the last couple of years. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Matt, can you talk about how you got into doing EJ work, sir?
Sure.
Take a couple minutes, and then we're going to transition to more of the NEJAC related questions. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, so I had done a lot of my academic research, my master's and my PhD, not in the United States, actually in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. But it was focused a lot, and I did a lot of research with the very grassroots environmental advocates and activists who were fighting for public health, who were fighting for what in the Balkans they wouldn't call it justice, but it was essentially justice about people being in control of their communities and their health and their families' futures. And I just got really it just felt like this was what I was supposed to find in all of my youth of searching and traveling and studying. And I knew I wanted to take that and go back to Texas and do that. I wanted to work to fight for people's health and for the rights of communities to be better places for children to grow up and for families to live. And it took a while, but I wound up being hired back home in Texas, in Houston, by this little organization that had really started out as an EJ organization in the 80s before people really called them EJ organizations, but just a group of citizens who were concerned about all the emissions on the ship channel and the effects it was having on local communities, and then nobody was helping, and nobody knew what was going on, and nobody had any information, and nobody was trying to monitor the air. But that organization was really kind of on its knees when I was hired. So they took a chance on me. I was a kid at that point, but we worked really hard, and we turned it around, and we took the organization back to the grassroots of supporting communities up and down the Houston Ship Channel and other parts of the Gulf Coast. Worked with a lot of other great EJ leaders and organizations like Juan Paras and Hilton Kelly. And that is what led me to then, after some time running that organization, to be selected to come up to EPA and run the Office of Environmental Justice.
Thank you, sir, for that. I want to move us forward a little, and I want you to talk about Director Tejada, your role within the Office of Environmental Justice and the administration, and I mean the Regan administration's renewed focus on environmental justice. What's happening? Let the folks know who are online with us. What's happening within the EPA? What's happening in your office? And what's up with this kind of renewed kind of work around this topic? Very important topic.
Sure, it is. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but this is a historic time for environmental justice, not just at EPA. With Administrator Regan, but across all of the federal family, even more so, than what had happened, I think, under President Obama, which made progress at advancing environmental justice and equity, especially at EPA. But I think what we've seen happen now is the focus of people like Michael Regan and the president and vice president coinciding at a time when not just our agency and our government, but our country and our society have finally come to a point of being willing to embrace and talk about and make the connections between communities that are struggling and suffering today and why that's so, right? Linking that to historic systems of oppression and racism, and really understanding that environmental justice isn't just this thing we're supposed to do when we're able to, or when we have some extra time at the end of the day, or after 95% of a decision is made and maybe we can do something good for some of those communities, but that it's our responsibility, because environmental justice isn't an accident. And at a place like EPA, what it has meant is, after 50 years of the EPA existing, and in my estimation, being one of the most successful entities that the United States government has ever created at achieving its mission, but recognizing that even though it's been so successful at achieving its mission broadly across the United States, the people in the communities that needed the help of the EPA the most since day one have received the least of that help, have been left behind, have been left out of the mission of EPA for its history. And when Administrator Regan talks about centering the mission of EPA on environmental justice, and he says it all the time, what I hear him saying is, we're going to start connecting, the fact that EJ is not an accident, that these communities don't just deserve our help, but they should be the first ones we help. And that we're no longer going to try to do something good for EJ, after most of the workday is done. But that's where we start when we wake up in the morning. That's where we start when we have a decision that we begin framing up, whether it's a rule or a permit or a cleanup, or how we disperse our allocations through grants and other things, right? It starts with thinking about, what is the environmental justice issue here, and how does that drive everything that happens afterwards? And that is a shift of paradigm for the agency. It is something that a lot of folks are frankly struggling with, kind of wrapping their heads around. You've done a great job for a lot of the country. We're not saying you did a bad job for a lot of the country, but you haven't helped other parts of the country. And now we need you to focus on that. We need you to focus on extending environmental health protection, extending the access to a clean environment and natural resources to the folks who have needed that the most from the outset.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Matt. And so my NEJAC brethren, who I've been, with on NEJAC. Some of you, Nataki, how many years? You came on after me a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think I came on maybe right before April, so
Okay, so you got
about
okay.
3 years.
Still pretty new.
Yeah, so you're still pretty new, So
I'm a newbie, yeah.
you're still a newbie. So you heard what Director Tejada said. What do you think when it comes to your role in NEJAC? And I'll say this for those of you, I like I said, I'm an outgoing member of NEJAC. My last meeting was actually yesterday. I'll still be, engaged as an ad hoc member. But I was on NEJAC, during the Trump administration. And so those were some tough years. And I feel a sense of hope, a sense of renewed purpose. So how do you feel as members of NEJAC now? Let me go to Mike first. How are you feeling about your duty and your opportunity to have more impact as a member of NEJAC?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is I feel great about it. The second thing I would add is I'm a little bit nervous because the expectations, which we're going to rise up and meet, are really high for substantive input from NEJAC to the program offices. And I'll say this, I don't want to say, I really appreciated the context that Matt gave us. And what I don't want to hit too hard on, but I do want to say at some level, it's a little bit early to tell. This is new. It's a radical shift. It's new. The early engagement from the EPA leadership has been, I'm going to go right. Matt was worried about being hyperbolic. I'm going to go right to extraordinary. And I'll say it blew my mind that the leadership was coming with information, with requests, with responses to our questions in a way that was, I'll go back, extraordinary. Now, what happens next? What I think we need to be just a little sensitive to is that there's this rush and it becomes, if not a one and done, a one, but the 2, 3, 4, and 5 are really diminished. I don't think that's what's going to happen, that the engagement is going to be ongoing and substantive, but NEJAC is going to have to be as council members, we're going to have to be on the ball to ensure that that level of engagement and the power of our voice is sustained.
Thank you for that. And just for our audience members, you're hearing about NEJAC. I want to give you a little bit more background on NEJAC. NEJAC came out of President Clinton's executive order on environmental justice, 12898. Right. NEJAC has been around for a while. NEJAC is a federal factor. So you have folks from local government, tribal representatives, community members, folks from the business and industry sector, folks from academia who all provide a service, as members of this FACA, this Federal Advisory Committee, right? And so you have folks who've been advising the EPA, for nearly 30 years. Well, I'm rounding up a little bit, maybe too high, but you get what I'm saying. Nearly 30 years on issues of environmental justice. And so you've had multiple administrations, right? The Clinton administration. You had, the Clinton administration, Bush administration. I'm sorry, not Bush's. That's father before Clinton. Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and now the Biden-Harris administration. So you have folks who've been committed to this work and providing this advice, these recommendations on these very tough issues for multiple years. And so, as I said, Trump administration, things were tough, but again, you had this renewed hope and renewed opportunity. So let's dig in a little bit more. I'll pass the mic to April. So how are you feeling right now with this opportunity, with this this new call?
Thanks. I'll echo Mike here. I started my term sort of at the middle almost end of the Trump administration. And when I received the call to serve, it was I had to think about it, because I was like, I don't know, I don't know if I want to take up the service. But then in thinking through it, I was like, well, what's the purpose of the service, right? The service is not necessarily to serve the government; it's to serve the communities that are facing environmental injustices. And so, with that renewed interest, I joined. I accepted the nomination to serve, and I think that it's coming in that tail end. We only had one in person, and then COVID impacted everything. But I would say that there is a renewed sense of excitement that I see among the council members. There's a renewed sort of energy to be able to continue putting even more energy and effort into addressing some of the issues, to make those connections across the different federal agency council groups that might be able to advise us on issues, and renewed interest in hearing from the public the issues that they are facing, and to be able to push the Office of Environmental Justice, and by extension the broader EPA, to really address these concerns in a meaningful way, and to look for solutions, right? So that we're not just hearing problems over and over, but to really look for solutions. So I would echo that it is hopeful. It's exciting to see the kind of work. It's a second full-time job, but I think that it really is worth it at the end of the day, to be able to engage with a wide range of individuals who's working towards a common goal, which is to be able to address environmental injustices in a real and a substantial way, to seek solutions.
Well, thank you for that. Nataki, how are you feeling?
Well, I think I'm just gonna kind of join the chorus of voices that have gone before me in saying that I'm definitely very excited. Excuse me. This feels like a great time to be a part of the NEJACs, to kind of get into the press and to really try to make some things happen. I think we've heard some great signals from the leadership of EPA in terms of Administrator Regan and what he's sort of laid out. I'm excited about new things that I'm hearing from the Office of Environmental Justice as well. But it's all about, how can we take this perhaps limited time to get some good things done. So the devil is in the details, as they say. I am full of, excitement and hope. It almost seemed like during the Trump administration, it was like, how much can we just sort of stop the carnage? Now we're at a point that, we've got to, there's a lot of work that needs to happen to roll back rollbacks that that administration put in place. But how can we not just roll back the rollbacks, but really move forward to a point where we are seeking, in a very real and tangible way, environmental justice for communities across this country. We're not just talking about communities surviving, we're talking about thriving, healthy and whole communities. It's going to take a while to get there, but I think we have some good ammunition if we can follow that through with some action, some solid action. Then I think that we'll be moving in the right direction.
Thank you. So with Regan's renewed focus, and we've seen some of the actions. For those of you who participated in NEJAC recently, we just had a meeting on the 18th and 19th. There was some highlights of what this administration's been doing. Regan's administration's been doing within the EPA. So for you as NEJAC members, I'll start with the NEJAC members first, Matt, and come back around to you. What do you see as priority issues, right? I mean, what are things, and hopefully this is not breaking any FACA rules, but what that's why I have y'all here like, oh, there are FACA rules? Okay, I just want to say, just share with the audience, what do you see as priorities as we move forward? What things are you working on? What things are you see as the things that are most important to the communities that we serve, that you're trying to address as a member of NEJAC? And let me go to April first.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing that came to my mind in sort of, there is so much, but I think one of the biggest thing is climate. Climate change, the climate crisis, and that feeds into Justice 40, which is the work group that I'm co-chairing with you, Sacoby. Just addressing these issues of how do we really build capacity from a financial perspective in fence line communities, right? How do we get investment, but not just investment, but like actual funding into the hands of these community members so that they would be able to address the injustices that they face on a day-to-day basis, right? You have communities that live with these things, and we want to be able to address it. So I think that it's exciting to sort of see, the Justice 40 mandate come out. It's new. We're still trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean? How do we implement it? And I think that is exciting. And we hope, at least in our work group, one of the things that we're really trying to push for is, can we have within the implementation clear accountability, right? That we actually see where the funds are going, which communities might be receiving this, which communities might be receiving actual benefits from the work or from the investment that goes into whether it's clean energy, clean water, or the priority items that were listed in that mandate. So I would say that climate and then all the things that fall under that, I see as a priority. And I think that it is needed, right? I mean, we just had a climate report that came out that really did not give us a lot of hope in a lot of ways. And so we see that there is really a dire need for the administration to be able to address this, for the US to take the lead on this. And so that will be one of the things that I would say I see clearly as a priority, and I really embrace that.
Oh, hi, thanks for calling. Sorry.
Oh, mute. If you're not talking, please go on mute, please.
I know I wanted something more, but I'm not sure what it is.
Rachel, can you silence? If you could put on mute, please.
Yes, on it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Nataki, what's your one or two priorities that you think that the things that we should put at the top of the heap with this, since we have this new energy, new opportunity?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that are priorities, but as I think about sort of the overwhelming nature of climate change, what I would add to what April just mentioned, or are the work that is being done kind of in our water infrastructure work group, as well as kind of our air quality and community monitoring work group, because I think those have these overlaps in terms of many of the challenges and issues that we're struggling with and that communities are struggling with respect to climate change and as we look at some of those root causes and issues. So, in terms of the community monitoring and the air quality piece, we are still a part of a fossil fuel economy. And as those fossil fuels are burned, we are, experiencing severe impacts, to communities across the country. And so not only is the issue of air quality and air pollution, paramount, but really being able to make sure that communities have the resources and tools that they need to do their own monitoring, because we cannot depend on others necessarily to bring forward that data in a way that can, push forward some change for communities. So communities have got to do it themselves. So that I think is critical. When we think about the water infrastructure group, Flint very much is still in a water crisis, and there are lots of other, cities and even smaller locations that are having their own Flint moments that haven't necessarily been highlighted as much in the news. But that type of thing that has happened with our infrastructure just shows us how vulnerable, our communities are across the country in terms of that aging infrastructure that folks have, and how that infrastructure then, can mix in with, unjust policies and that sort of thing, and reap, devastation and, sickness and death on communities. So that's really important. And also from a water perspective, a water and climate change perspective, we've got, urban flooding, we've got drought, we've got, a number of issues that are, kind of converging, on communities. communities. So I see all of those things as being very important. I think we shouldn't silo these issues. We've got to acknowledge the intersectionality of those issues and work in interdisciplinary ways and with a diverse set, of stakeholders, including, lots of different members of the federal government to address these issues.
Thank you, Mike. What are the issues that rise to the top for you?
Not surprisingly, the issues that April and Nataki raised are critical issues. So I'll just try to build on that a little bit. What I was thinking about when I was rapidly trying to make my own list here, what rose to the top of mind was, empowering fence line, frontline communities with the technology and resources to be able to measure air pollution in their community on a very localized basis through that community air monitoring program where investments are being targeted. And just as important, marrying that to a much stronger enforcement regime. So when you know that the facility adjacent to you is out of compliance, something happens. They are driven to get back into compliance. You got to know, and then you need that follow-up from the enforcer. And in many cases, until proven otherwise, the regulator of last resort is EPA, and getting EPA to step in and act more rapidly. So I'm going to integrate those things together. One other thing, and I'm going to link it to Justice 40 in another area. The way in which funding flows to communities, a lot of it, Matt could speak to this far more comprehensively than I can, is through grants. So making sure that grant process is tailored in a way that the communities that are impacted are truly delivering, are really receiving direct benefits, doing the work, strengthening their capacity. And then to a lesser degree, it happens to be an area that I've kind of worked in on the contract side, making sure that contracts are flowing to small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, and local businesses, both as prime contracts, and making it a really, what I'll call, hard requirement for larger contractors who then, of course, work with those who need to work much more extensively with the businesses in the communities where the work is being done.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments. Matt, you want to chime in on this? I mean, you are, again, the Director, Office of Environmental Justice that staff and does work, with NEJAC. What do you see as things that, there's so much, as everybody's already said, that there's a lot of priorities that have been priorities for 400, 500 years. So, yeah. So what are those things that you're trying to knock out, as in your role as leader?
There's all of the things that everyone said, right? There's a ton of things we're trying to work on right now. Everything from grants to policy to structural change, programmatic change, educational change. At the end of the day, though, there's two big things that I think are kind of center of mind for me across all of these. One is we're talking about behavior change. We're talking about changing the behaviors of people in government to revalue and appreciate the history of racism and segregation and oppression in this country and what that has resulted in our modern society and how we have to live up to that. And that's tough, but that's one thing we're focused on, is how can we support pushing and coaxing and easing and greasing the skids for everyone to make that behavior change to the maximum extent we can over these years. And then the other thing that is center of mind is just like I think it was April that was talking about it, and to your earlier points, this administration is going to change. We don't know when, we don't know in which direction, but with every administration change, things shift. And we have an unprecedented moment in time, in history, in politics right now to make as much progress as we can. And we're trying to make as much of that progress as we can, knowing that some of it's going to backslide regardless of what happens in future elections. There's some things we're going to gain that we're going to lose. That's just natural. But we've got to know what the most important things are. And we've got to, and I think at least April and Nataki both talked about accountability, I think. We've got to be accountable to those things that are most important. And the best way I know and the best way I've seen for accountability is to make things transparent, because at the end of the day, I can't hold anybody accountable in EPA. Like, well, my staff, that's not entirely true. Like my staff and stuff, okay. But I can't hold people accountable all by myself to the changes that we're talking about and that I think we all want. And that transparency enables a body like NEJAC, which isn't an oversight body, it's not a watchdog, but it is an accountability instrument. And so are EJ leaders and community organizations and just community members. The more that we can make transparent the progress we are trying to make and the new horizon that we are trying to attain, the harder it is for anybody in the future, regardless of party or principle or whatever else, the harder it is to come back from that, right? Whether that's in making transparent how we fund things, where the dollars go, how we spend our time, how we prioritize our activities. The more we can make those transparent to everyone on the outside world, the more powerful that accountability of the outside world saying, wait a second, 2 years ago, you were spending $900 million over there, and now you're only spending 100. What's that about? That's not right, right? So those are the things that I'm really focused on.
Well, thank you for that. I want to talk to NEJAC members and ask you about some of your sort of like your experiences. I mean, many of you said you're 2-3 years in, so you're still pretty new to NEJAC. What have been some of the highlights and what have been some of the challenges for you? And I think you talked about it in response to being a member of NEJAC during the Trump administration. And I'll just say personally, as a NEJAC member then, it was mentally draining. That was tough. That was tough. And I think people, as I think Nataki said, the carnage, just try to reduce the carnage, right? But what have been some of the highlights for you as a NEJAC member? What are the challenges you see not as a member, but the challenge you see for NEJAC in this new moment? Because yes, y'all talk about the positive things. You're very aspirational, rah, great. But what are some of the challenges that you see? And think about when I talk about challenges, also the challenges for the movement, not just for NEJAC, but the larger movement with this new opportunity. So let me go to Nataki first.
Thank you for that, Sacoby. So, definitely, being on for the last, couple of years, you felt like we were just kind of treading water, and now it's like we've got our moment, right? So again, there's all of this excitement, but how do we pair that excitement with, real tangible things happening on the ground? And so I feel like the opportunity and the challenge are almost kind of one and the same here. We've got this opportunity, we've got a president who put out a vision, Justice 40. We have, administrator of the EPA that, came in the door talking about the elevation of environmental justice. But now how do we translate that talk into action? And from the NEJAC's perspective, the critical piece that I see us, one of the critical roles that I see us playing is being this convener for communities, for folks to come and to lift their voices and to say what their concerns are. And they're looking to us for direction. They're looking to us to help advocate on their behalfs. And they're looking for action. And so I said this at the NEJAC meeting on yesterday, but I almost feel overwhelmed, with the amount of things that are happening in communities and how we go about trying to make sure that these issues are resolved, that, it's not just about people coming to the public meetings and sharing their concerns, concerns, and, we empathize with them, and, affirm that what they're experiencing is not right and that something needs to change. But then how do we actually put that into practice and make something happen that's going to make a visible difference for these communities? So I think we're at no other point before now, we are in a moment, I think, that can give us some liftoff. But how can we now pair that opportunity with tangible action on the ground? So that's the challenge at the same time.
So thank you for that, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sort of thinking about two dimensions that I think are connected. One is, and just as Nataki said, NEJAC has served the role of being a voice for communities that have been severely impacted by pollution and by bad policy. That has really had such a substantial and deleterious impact on quality of life. Historically, including through the Trump administration, we have NEJAC as a body has worked to serve as a voice for those communities. And now we want to, I think there is a much clearer communication channel to the programs to make sure that voice is heard at the policy making, at the funding, at the regulatory development levels. The real, I'll go to the overwhelmed word, which Nataki just used, and I think it's very appropriate. I am worried, do we have the resources we need to really be effective in that role? And I am sure that there are going to be some really important issues that are tugging both at our heads and our hearts that we may not be able to get to because of resource limitations. Therefore, I think as a body, and I know we've talked to Matt about this, we're going to have to find mechanisms to pull resources from out of NEJAC to help us deliver our NEJAC mission.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to April next, and then after April, Cheryl, can you go ahead and join us? I want you to join us. I'm gonna go to April next, and then Cheryl, you can say who you are and talk about your NEJAC experience and talk about the challenges to NEJAC and to the movement today. So let me go to April first and come to you, Cheryl. Go ahead, April.
Thanks, Sacoby. I'll be brief. I think the one thing that I would say is that right now, there is a need to focus on within the marginalized communities, there are additional marginality, if that makes sense. So the thing that comes to my mind is, for example, again, given my Caribbean heritage, thinking about Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, other territories of the United States that themselves face these marginalized issues, but because they're not continental, they're not always elevated in the same way. And we recognize that there are just, a slew of these historical injustices that just have not been addressed. And so I think that's a challenge for the EPA. How do you seriously take on decades of neglect, decades of oppression, decades of racism, and really try to address these issues? But as I said, within that, I do think that there are additional I call this comparative vulnerabilities, right? Where you have vulnerable communities within even the marginalized that need to also be elevated to some extent. And I think that some attention might need to be given there. So I'll stop there, but I think that might be a real pressing challenge.
Thank you for that. Now I want to give Cheryl Johnson the floor. She's an outgoing NEJAC member with me, owned NEJAC for 6 years. Cheryl, tell everybody who you are and talk about this moment of opportunity for NEJAC and also what you see as the challenges for NEJAC in your own words, please. Go ahead, Cheryl. Oh, you're on mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cheryl Johnson, and I'm the Executive Director of People for Community Recovery. We're located in Augill Gardens. It's a public housing development in Chicago that was founded by my late mother, Hazel Johnson, who's known as the mother of environmental justice. I served 6 years on the NEJAC, and my highlight was the fact that even though at our last meeting, because we have a real battle of a classical environmental racism practices here in the city of Chicago, and it's with a scrapyard being relocated from a affluent neighborhood to my neighborhood area. Is when Administrator Regan sent a letter to our mayor asking her not to give the operating permit to this facility until they had come up with some environmental assessment tools to use in the determination of how they do land use practices in the city of Chicago. I mean, I know many people know that Chicago is a highly segregated area, and my mother coined our area the toxic donut. We like in the center and outside the parameter of this donut is all these toxic facilities. And this is the same area that they was promote for this shredder to be relocated in our community. So, and we filed a Title VI complaint against them, against the city of Chicago rather, to demonstrate that in their land use practice, they've been highly using discriminatory practices when it comes to siting of facilities in poor Black and brown neighborhoods. That was the ultimate highlight, because the reason why I say that, our area is in Region 5 of US EPA, and it has never been supported as or implement any type of letter to that nature ever before in the history that I've been involved with EJAC issue. And that's been 36 years that I've been doing EJAC work in particular. So to see that happen, I was really shocked to know that happened, because two of us, I spoke as a member and also someone in the audience spoke about it. So to see some action really happen that was really critical to us at this point, and we're still fighting because we still don't know if the city is going to give their operating permit to this facility. But that was the ultimate highlight for me. But I see that the challenge would be whatever policies and practices that are put in place, how it's going to be interpreted at the regional level is my concern, because there's our territorial issues, and when it comes to Chicago, when it comes to Illinois, I hear about how corrupted my state is, and which is it, and so is the city. So when we look at the implementation of any supported services that's going to benefit BIPOC communities, it depends on what region you're in. And it has to be, it has to be equal across the base of all regions in order to see some substance that comes out of it. So I just hope that with the new White House NEJAC office and this NEJAC council will really come up with some real concrete, with some teeth and some repercussions if those teeth, if those policies and stuff is not being enforced. And it needs to have a mechanism in place where we as residents, because I still live in public housing, can challenge those processes if I feel that they bias and unfair to me as a citizen, but also as that will have a negative impact on my community.
Thank you for that. Powerful words. I mean, this, for folks who don't know, you think about the 17 principles of environmental justice. I think I might have mentioned this before I've been in this session or a different session. Principles 5 and 7. I mean, let me go back. This is the 30th anniversary of the First People of Color Summit. And that's where those principles were written, right? Principles 5 and 7, communities speak with their own voice, and communities need to be engaged in decision-making. That's what Cheryl just said. That's the heart of environmental justice. That's why we got a NEJAC. We were reminded last night by Richard Moore, one of our esteemed EJ icons on NEJAC. Anything that's being done by the government is not the government that drives it. It's the community that drives it. It's not just academia who drives it, it's the community that drives it. It's not business and industry that drives it. So, you know, it's a big part of the problem in many places, right? It's the community that drives it. So we want to make sure you take from this session, you have this NEJAC, but we want to make it, NEJAC was founded because of community voices, like Cheryl's mom, Miss Hazel Johnson. So we want to make sure that those of you who are out here doing EJ work, that you are engaging frontline and fence line folks, right? And their voice should be in there at all stages of the process when we're developing these solutions and implementing the solutions.
And yeah, and can I say too that
Go ahead.
it's not just about industrial pollution in our community. It's about the disinvestment in our community, which leads to the education and the economic opportunity that is in our community, or the preservation of something that is significant to our community, you know. And when those things be threatened, then or even talking about gentrification in our communities, you know, we're trying to prepare ourselves right now today. How are we going to provide assistance when this moratorium expires? So, because that create a risk in your community if it increased vacancy in our community, for an example. But also, you see this trend that is going on with rent being exorbitantly high where we cannot afford it. You know, so those are the injustices. Those are some of the environmental injustices that we have. In my community, we just can't fight just the industrial pollution in our area. We have to fight the systemic problems that we have and the institutional problems that we have in our community, and also try to manage some of the social problems that we have in our community. Because if you don't do those, if you don't address those elements in your community, your community is doomed to be an environmental degradation in your prospective area.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. Let me, we have about 12 minutes left. I want to, do maybe one lightning question, one last question, and maybe take a few questions from the audience. I think we have at least one question from the audience in the chat. So if you're interested in having your question answered, please drop your questions in the chat now. I have just a quick lightning response for everybody, because we have 6 folks now, and just want to ask you, what's the future of NEJAC as part of your lightning response? And then also, how can people get more engaged with NEJAC? Make NEJAC local. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So that's my closeout question for you. What's the future of NEJAC, and how can we bring NEJAC to the people? So let me go to the mic first.
I'm going to steal an idea that I first heard from you, Dr. Wilson, and that is the creation of, for lack of a better term, regional NEJACs that are working both more directly with the EPA regions, because Cheryl made some really critical points about unequal performance from region to region, as supplemental, and I talked about the need for more resources, but I think that's a really critical next step, whether it's formally connected to NEJAC or created as through a separate mechanism. I really think to deliver in this and seize this moment, that's a really critical challenge and an important step for environmental justice within the broader EPA to really do a better job of both hearing being a voice for the communities and delivering real benefits to communities.
Thank you for that. April.
Yeah, I think that one, beyond public comments, right? So for our public comment, NEJAC, we encourage residents to bring their issues, right? To elevate it, ask the NEJAC to be able to sort of advocate on behalf of them. I wonder if there's a way for NEJAC to go out right? To be a little bit more active, right? So, and I know COVID has affected that, and I know that we have done in-person meetings in specific locations, but I would like to see, I'm not even thinking about some of these big groups, maybe even work groups that are working on issues, send them out to the community to investigate, to find out what are the issues, what have been done, what else do we need to do, and see those issues through to resolution. So I think that actually going out, doing some field work, I think would be really important. And that's where sort of like some of this funding could probably go to as well, not just to make people travel, but to really be able to go out there and to meet people versus asking them to always come to the NEJAC public meetings.
Well, thank you. Nataki?
Yeah, I would just add to both of those, and I really love April's, statement about NEJAC going out, instead of having everybody come, to these various locations. Obviously, in kind of the older days pre-COVID, the idea was that, when NEJAC comes, goes to a particular place, that you spend some time, with that local community, you learn about those community challenges and struggles, and, you kind of make that at least some, a focal point, of the meeting. So the hope is, obviously that we can get back to that sort of thing, but I also like this idea of just making sure that NEJAC is out, in the community beyond, that one or a couple of meetings that happen a year. I would also say that, now that we are in this virtual space and we're doing the public meetings virtually, once we're able to travel again, maybe we should keep some element of that. Because really, when we had those meetings in person, if the NEJAC is not going to folks, it's the onus is on those people, on community residents, to get the money to go to DC or to go wherever the NEJAC meeting is, to give a 3-minute public comment, right? Just to get those issues elevated. And so we've got to, I think about other ways. And COVID, with challenges come, some sort of, innovation. And so I think, we should think about, keeping at least some forum available for people to, call in and not always have to go, wherever the NEJAC is, in some part of the country.
Cheryl, what do you think in future NEJAC, what are some of your ideas for getting out there to the people?
Well, one of the things I was just thinking that basically, I think NEJAC got to be relevant to the community. Mm-hmm. And it almost has to be something that we can identify to recognize with, let me give you an example, like the Red Cross. Mm-hmm. When you know what Red Cross stands for.
The brand.
It's the branding there that we need to make NEJAC more relevant to our communities. Because to be honest, people don't know about NEJAC from the very heart of the community. And because we have to address so many different issues, like in my community, for an example, and then I'm not even talking about, because sometimes government act like the game bangers in my own community because they got territorial issues. And being in public housing just complicated even more, because being in public housing, that's a HUD issue. Oh no, the city can't do anything, or the education can't do nothing, because all these, but they all work for the common good of the people. So how would we can make NEJAC relevant where there's, even when it's just responding to a crisis in our community? Do you realize, because Sacoby, when we went through looking at the demographics and the issues in my community, you was overwhelmed. But we the last to get the information about our community, the last to be able, and I don't have the skill. I'm a community person, so I don't have the technical expertise to be able to explain what all this stuff means to my community. And then to tell them where I understand what are the risk factors, but the preparation to be able to respond to when there are crises come, we're the last to be recognized. And government need to recognize that the most vulnerable population is the one that need the information most, but that's the information, we get the least of the information. Mind you, we've been doing environmental work for 42 years. 42 years. And only have a staff of 6 people. But it's always been 3 people. The last 3 years, we gained 3 people. That's the inequity. That's what the injustice come at, because in the city of Chicago, they don't reckon, we don't even have an ordinance. We don't even have a state law. We got a commission. We got an Illinois Environmental Justice Commission with no funding, no staff. So when you look at trying to make a difference in your own respected area, you got to look at what is the political dynamics of your state. And basically, my state do not care. My city didn't care about EJ issues until it became, I remember a time when EJ wasn't even a common conversation among everybody. People was unaware, what is that?
Mhm.
And I remember seeing my mother be ostracized and talked about and called names just because she was trying to seek justice from the polluters in our communities and just to make them be in compliance. So when I look at this thing, that's why I said, when it's going to be relevance to my community? And that's where we got to take NEJAC.
Oh, thank you. Making NEJAC relevant, that branding that you said, nobody knows. People know the Red Cross, people know the Girl Scouts, but you need a brand. NEJAC for the people, right? Isn't what y'all saying, Nataki? As you saying, April, as you saying, Mike, how you get NEJAC to the people. And so I appreciate those words, Cheryl, about your experiences, your community. And I think it's a powerful message for our director, OEJ, to take forward back to the administrator. And Matt, I had been holding you off. I want to have the NEJAC members talk more, but we have a couple more minutes left. I want you to respond. And combo question, Matt, what's the future of NEJAC? What's the future of OEJ in this moment, right? And also, can you connect that to the question that we have in the chat from Rebecca? Shout out to Rebecca, my first student at Maryland, doing good things. They grow up. I love to see people grow up and doing things. But how can future NEJAC, future OEJ, and how can we talk about getting NEJAC to the people? How can we get the NEJAC model out to the people, out to these states, out to the federal agencies, out to the state level, and make sure it's accountability though, not just as Cheryl said, having an empty commission with no money and no staff, but something that has real impact.
I mean, that's one of the critical issues. And to Rebecca's question first, and we do share recommendations with other agencies, but it's how interested are other agencies, or how interested are people at EPA in those recommendations. And historically, people will look at NEJAC stuff, but a lot of the times, it's 5 or 10 years after the NEJAC recommends something that people in the government finally catch up to. Oh, that's a good idea. We might be able to do that. Right now with this administration, and I said this to the NEJAC a few weeks ago, I think the NEJAC reports have been read more and been given more serious attention over the last 3 months than they had been in the previous 3 decades altogether. Because the folks that are in this administration right now, they're starting with NEJAC. What has NEJAC said about this? I mean, I think we've established 3 different digital libraries in EPA because everyone's looking for the NEJAC reports. As to whether other agencies should establish bodies, I mean, that's a question for them. I think it'd be great if everyone across all levels of government has some way to regularly interact and hear from and receive feedback from and some accountability from EJ communities and leaders. There's an issue there though, where again, with resources, you're gonna run out of people real quick at the community level that have the support to just participate on an NEJAC. Without paying them or without giving them capacity building, you're gonna run out of Natakis and Cheryls and Aprils and Mikes pretty quickly, right? There's not that many of them to go around right now. So that's another issue that we gotta focus on. As far as the future of the NEJAC, for a long time, and part of it's, the resource question, Nataki said earlier, treading water. I mean, they've been treading water on the NEJAC for a long time. We've been treading water with the NEJAC for a long time inside too. like just barely able to keep the NEJAC supported and keep it surviving. And in that sort of a paradigm, you know, the best we could do was say, well, let's look out, you know, the NEJAC should be looking out a decade. The NEJAC should be talking about the policy horizon, because it's going to take the agency a long time to get there. It's going to take the NEJAC a long time to come up with the advice and recommendations. That time's over. Like, now is the time where the NEJAC is a vibrant, relevant accountability instrument for the EPA, which means we got to be on time. We got to have lots of engagement. We got to have these regional NEJACs or these regional abilities. And to April's point, yeah, that's something we talked about a long time too. You know, getting NEJAC folks out, you know, to hot spots, to areas where something's going down. And I think for the first time ever, we're going to have both the opportunity and the support and the mandate to actually start to operate NEJAC in a way that I think people have been searching for and demanding for since it was established. And I'll correct you at the very end here. In 1993, a year before the executive order was signed.
So that I would have lost that Jeopardy final question. that would have been really bad. Thank you to my NEJAC family. Thank you, Director Tejada, for joining us. Thank you, Cheryl, for coming on board and bringing that additional community perspective to these issues. Appreciate y'all. We'll miss y'all. And again, I think hopefully the audience, you know, learned about NEJAC, and you should reach out to these NEJAC members, and you should be fighting in your region to have a regional NEJAC. You should be fighting to have a NEJAC at the state level, not just those empty commissions. And I'm in this, well, he's not saying anything bad. Y'all know what I'm saying. I want to say too, y'all know how I go too far sometimes. I'm gonna put myself back in. But thank you, panelists. Audience members, please thank the panelists. If you agree this is a great session, you put your hands up, put it in the chat. But thank you, everybody, and hopefully you can join us for our closing plenary session. This is going to be from the Donors of Color Network. So it's another big issue in the EJ movement. Is going to be about funding and DEI and funding. So thank you again, and hopefully you'll join us at our 3:40 session. Okay, bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jacoby.
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Y'all take care, fam.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.